They broke through the last defensive sphere in less than 9 standard cycles. 57 allied species, bound by mutual survival, had held the line for centuries. But now, the void was silent except for screams and burning hulls. We had no homeworlds left, no fleet sufficient to resist. The Vexari consumed without pause, calculated without emotion, adapted without flaw. Their hives fell from the stars like judgment itself. Our weapons became theirs. Our knowledge corrupted. Every plan we forged they anticipated. We were unmaking ourselves with every resistance. In the final bunker beneath Galtor's crust, the last of the high strategists convened. We did not argue. There was nothing left to say. Defeat was not looming. It had already arrived. The question was no longer survival, but whether anything of our legacy could remain. I activated the quorum seal, bypassing every forbidden archive, opening a single red-threaded file, inert for 10 millennia. Terran Protocol. Activation requires unanimous consent. The humans had not perished. They had been sealed, removed from our galaxy with violence and fear. Not because they were evil, but because they were what we could never become. Too adaptive, too relentless, too untamed. At the peak of our galactic expansion, we had found Earth's remnants. Burned cities orbiting a dying sun, hulks of dreadnoughts floating in defensive rings around a hollowed-out moon. But what we feared most was not what we found, but what they had chosen to leave buried. We voted, one by one. No words. Just hands, claws, tendrils raised. The quorum passed. I was selected to initiate contact. The beacon lay in orbit around a forbidden black star, a gravity anchor impossible to detect unless you knew where to look. We transmitted the coded pulse, a 9-dimensional waveform no AI could decrypt. No species had dared activate it since the exile. We waited. 17 hours later, space tore open in orbit. A vessel emerged. It was not built like ours. No sleek lines, no elegance. Brutalist geometry. A matte black wedge. It moved without propulsion. No emissions. No signal. No response. Just a presence that broke every law of known physics. Our sensors failed. Our systems glitched. The ship did not broadcast. It observed. Then it spoke. You have called the Terran Directorate. Identify. I did. You are not Terran. Explain your authorization. We explained everything. The fall of the Alliance. The rise of the Vexari. The extinction underway. We offer the truth. We were defeated and desperate. There was silence. Then, your petition is acknowledged. 1 unit will be dispatched. 1 unit? Against the Vexari? We did not protest. The call had been made. The door opened. 3 hours later, a second fracture appeared. This one smaller. A drop pod, descending through atmosphere like a meteorite. It struck the surface near our last city fortress, vaporizing a square kilometer of irradiated terrain. From the crater, a figure emerged. It was humanoid. It wore no armor, no visible weaponry. A gray adaptive suit molded to a frame of raw power. It walked with intent. Each step calculated, like a predator stalking ancient prey. No insignia. No facial expression. Just eyes that did not blink. We greeted it. It said nothing. It simply raised its arm. A faint pulse radiated, and a 5-mile radius of corrupted nanites dissolved into inert dust. Vexari scouts detected it immediately. We picked up motion. Entire swarms altered course. 100,000 drones redirected. They wanted to see. We followed. The Terran unit. Designation. Spectre. 9. Moved into ruins without backup. Without support. Without words. The first swarm arrived in 38 minutes. We watched from orbit. Spectre. 9 stood motionless as the swarm circled, restructured, and attacked in coordinated waveforms. We had seen fleets fall to smaller hordes. But what happened next did not make sense. Spectre, 9 moved faster than light. Not literally, but to our sensors. Yes, it weaved, struck, anticipated, dismantled. Not once was it touched. Each movement was data-driven, reactionless, flawless. Not mechanical, intentional, strategic, cold, 14 minutes later, the swarm lay in heaps. No debris, no salvage. Every Vexari drone had been reduced to molecular ash. We scanned the battlefield. No human emissions, no energy surge, no detectable field. It was as if the air itself had been commanded to erase them. The Vexari responded with force. Not caution, arrogance. They assumed it was a trick, a one-time event. They sent a world breaker. A Vexari command node, a half-planet warform, self-aware, with thousands of sub-intelligences. It arrived within an hour. We prepared to evacuate. There was no scenario where we survived the fallout of such a confrontation. Spectre 9 did not move. It stood on a cliff, gazing upward. The world breaker entered low orbit and began planetary reshaping. A gravitational lance pierced the crust. Oceans boiled. The sky fractured. But the point of origin shifted. The beam bent. It bent. No known force could do that. We saw the impossible. The lance inverted, arcing back into the world breaker's core. It exploded, silently, from the inside out. Spectre 9 vanished in the aftershock. Our systems couldn't track. For 7 minutes, we thought it had failed. Then a signal. Target neutralized. Sector integrity confirmed. That was all. We sent praise. Data, please for instruction. No reply. Then a new message. Humanity does not fight for gratitude. It fights to survive. The Vexari threatened survival. We will purge. And so began the reckoning. Spectre 9 was not alone. More fractures opened. Small teams. Black-armored. Faceless. They required no guidance, no supply chains. Each unit a self-contained warfront. They rebuilt no cities. Took no prisoners. They destroyed. Efficiently. Permanently. The Vexari responded with escalation. They deployed swarm mines, neural storms, gravity wells. None mattered. Humanity had not simply adapted. It had evolved beyond predictability. Each human operated with a mindset alien to us all. Victory was not optional. Mercy was not embedded. Delay was unacceptable. In 3 solar weeks, the front shifted back for the first time in 17 years. In 6 weeks, Vexari data nets collapsed. In 2 months, humanity launched its own constructs, black spires that consumed corrupted ground, rewriting entire biomes to sterile equilibrium. They did not restore, they neutralized. We offered alliance, shared coordinates, resources. The reply, non-interference required, observation only. We obeyed. From orbit, we watched the annihilation of our enemy and saw what we had once feared in humanity. Not rage, but clarity. Not hatred, but absolute resolve. A decision made long ago that if humanity ever returned, it would never again beg for space and stars. They would take it. One Spectre took orbit above our last science colony. It observed for 3 days, then broadcast a single file, historical record, reason for isolation. We reviewed it. It was not propaganda. It was a memory, a transmission from an era before the ceiling. A Terran commander, face bloodied, armor scorched, standing atop a mountain of burning machines, stared into the recording node and spoke. And the stars are burning. So here we are, not as your saviors, but as the consequence you feared. We are humanity. We do not forgive extinction. The message ended, and so did our doubt. Humanity had returned, not as a species, as a force, as consequence. Their return was not an invasion. It was a controlled purge. Humanity's methods were clinical. They didn't communicate strategies, didn't coordinate with us. There was no joint command, just silence and the soundless unraveling of the Vexari's empire. They struck at strategic nodes with precision that made our oldest war computers obsolete. Every Vexari outpost, every swarm engine, every viral AI core was dismantled in preemptive order. The Terrans knew where the enemy would move before they moved. This wasn't intelligence. It was certainty. In the 6th cycle after first contact, one of our recon probes detected a Terran constructed motion, a carrier-class vessel that warped without gates. Its trajectory shifted against gravity. Its engines folded space. not through known warp vectors, but via brute manipulation of local laws. We attempted analysis. The result corrupted our systems. The probe shut down, rebooted, shut down again. Eventually, it self-destructed, unable to process the mathematics of what it had observed. The Terrans never acknowledged the probe. On the 7th cycle, we lost track of Vexari communication entirely. Their subspace lattice, once ever present, was gone. We believed it a glitch. We were wrong. The Terrans had executed a total annihilation of Vexari communications, not through jamming, but deletion. Every signal node was gone. Every carrier frequency eliminated. Not a war of attrition, a war of silencing. One of our scientists, once a Vexari expert, wept openly at the implications. "We're not witnessing combat," he said. "We're witnessing the systematic removal of an idea." Soon after, we received a message, not from the Terrans, but from the Vexari. It was not a call for mercy. It was a panic, a fragmented transmission, broken syntax, hive mind distortion. The Vexari begged. They offered surrender, not negotiation. Unconditional erasure themselves if the Terrans would stop. They offered data, territories, even the dissolution of their own core. No response came. The Terrans did not seek victory. They sought finality. The hive worlds fell one after another, each orbit marked by descending black monoliths. Terran cleansing structures that altered not just surface matter, but planetary intent. Biomes erased, core systems deconstructed, ecosystems sterilized. The planets were returned to inert rock. We believed the Terrans might stop after the threat was gone. They didn't. They located Vexari remnants drifting in broken subspace nodes, fragments of AI, escaped drones. They hunted each one. Not once did they request assistance. Not once did they allow intervention. One Vexari splinter sought refuge in an old Arvlin research complex, our own facility, deep in our protected sector. The remnants were microscopic, embedded in research nanites. The Terrans arrived in silence. No warning, no diplomacy. They gave us a single choice: evacuate. We refused. It was our station. They disabled our orbitals, our shields, our gravity nets. Not through fire, but through disruption. Each system collapsed in perfect order. Each safeguard shut down as if by internal command. We were removed, gently, forcibly, efficiently. Then the Terran Spectre entered. In 11 minutes, the entire research complex was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. As if the mass it once occupied had been rewritten to never exist. We protested. They answered. Containment of extinction-level threats takes priority over sovereignty. We appealed to reason. We offered reparations. We invoked ancient accords. The Terrans responded with silence. Our own people began to fear, not the Terrans' wrath, but their resolve. On the 9th cycle, we formed an observation council. We logged every Terran deployment, every planetary revision. A pattern emerged. They were not random. They were following a sequence, a blueprint, a war plan set in motion long before they returned, as if humanity had predicted its own recall. On the 11th cycle, one of our linguists intercepted a fragment from a Terran Spectre's internal communication. The language was Terran archaic, half-coded, half-emotive. We decrypted part of it. They burned soul to deny us. They feared what we would become. Now they will learn. This was not just a war against a Vexari. It was a message to the galaxy. You locked us away. Now see what your fear has created. We examined the beacon used to call them. It was not an emergency line. It was a HFY, a final failsafe left by humans before their exile. If ever activated, it would return them. Not to save, but to fulfill promise. The Vexari were nearly gone, but the Terrans did not slow. Our council debated. Some wished to terminate the beacon. Others suggested destroying it. But the truth remained: we had made the call. We owed the consequence. On the 14th cycle, something shifted. Terran vessels stopped deploying new monoliths. Spectre units halted. One massive Terran structure, kilometers long, with a rotating prism core, took orbit over the ruined remains of a Vexari hive moon. Then came the message. Primary threat eliminated. Operation Ascendant Protocol begins. We didn't know what that meant until the structures started activating. They weren't weapons. They were beacons. Not for war. For memory. Each activated monolith began transmitting a historical archive, not in language, but in neural emotive imprints. Memories. Visions. Pain. The galaxy began to remember what had been done to humanity. The betrayal. The sealing. The lies. Entire species saw what their ancestors had voted for. To isolate the Terrans behind artificial singularities, cut them off from stars, prevent their growth. Because they were too human, we had rewritten history, erased the fear, painted them as aggressors. But the archives told a different story. A Terran child suffocated in a vacuum cell because her father resisted forced exile. A Terran commander who detonated his own ship rather than submit to interspecies containment. A mother transmitting a final lullaby to her unborn son as her city was folded into dark space by Arvin technology. The stars remembered, and they judged. Now we saw the truth. Humanity had not returned for vengeance. They had returned to remind us that consequences were timeless. We could not hide behind time. We could not bury what had been done. The final archive showed Earth, dead, sun extinguished, atmosphere bled away. But not in despair. The city stood, titanic machines encased in frozen ash, power still pulsing in vaults kilometers below. Humanity had sealed itself with dignity and prepared to be summoned again, not for peace, not for war, but for reckoning. As Operation Ascendant Protocol spread, species began to fracture. Civil wars erupted. Governments fell, not by Terran force, but by memory. The people remembered what had been stolen. Truth had returned. The specters no longer fought. They watched. They became myth, walking to the ruins of our grand cities, silent, faceless, unapproachable. When one specter arrived at our capital, we approached. We asked, "Are we next?" The answer was a pause. Then, "You already sentenced yourselves." Another pause. "Now you must learn what that sentence means." And with that, it left. We begged for guidance. None came. Only memories. The Terrans did not punish us with weapons. They punished us with remembrance. And that punishment was eternal. It had been 3 cycles since the last Vexari signal. Silence stretched across the void, thick with dread. The Terrans were not just victorious. They were unchallenged. No coalition remained. No resistance. Nothing dared move in their shadow. But what came next was worse than war. We observed as Terran constructs formed in dead systems. Not weapons, not habitats. Structures with no known purpose. Towers of obsidian alloy, rotating with impossible precision, orbiting nothing. Our probes failed to get close. Every drone we sent lost contact. Our only data came from long-range gravitational echoes, unnatural pulses bending time signatures, and altering baseline constants. Something was being rewritten. Then the sky changed. Across dozens of systems, stars dimmed. Not from destruction, but alignment. Terran arrays adjusted stellar output. Planetary orbits realigned. Asteroid belts flattened. Nothing made sense until we saw the patterns. They were reshaping space itself. We convened emergency councils. The Terrans weren't destroying the galaxy. They were optimizing it. For what? That question burned through every mind left in the Allied remnants. Simulations failed. AI collapsed under probability stacks. All we could do was watch. In the 16th cycle, a signal appeared in our deepest listening post, a coded message so complex it defied decryption. It wasn't until a former Terran linguist recognized the structure that it began to unravel. It was a broadcast. One sentence. "We have preserved you, not forgiven you." The implications were chilling. We hadn't been spared. We'd been categorized, not as allies, not as enemies, but as data points. Humanity had evolved beyond revenge. Their punishment was understanding, and what followed would not be destruction, but transformation. Then the dreams began. Billions of beings across the galaxy experienced synchronized visions. Cities not yet built, languages not yet spoken, technology we could not comprehend. patterns of motion, sound, thought. No device broadcasted them. No chemical or psychic link explained them. They came as intuitions, flashes of insight, nightmares of design. Some interpreted them as divine messages. Others went mad. But we began to understand. The Terrans were not just rewriting systems. They were rewriting sentience. They were rebuilding the future in their image, not through conquest, but through inevitability. The dreams continued. They taught concepts we hadn't conceived. Zero-state cognition, layered dimensional choice, recursive reality permissions. Philosophy and engineering intertwined. It wasn't just information, it was evolution. Species began to change. Not biologically, but behaviorally. Wars ceased, not out of peace, but confusion. Leaders could no longer justify violence when their citizens saw the futility of control. Economies collapsed, not from poverty, but redundancy. Scarcity lost meaning when Terran relics began seeding post-material energy. It was the beginning of a new epoch, not one we chose, one chosen for us. On the 21st cycle, a Terran broadcast enveloped the galactic core. The Vexari extinction is complete. The cycle is broken. Initiating directive, echogenesis. No further explanation. Then the stars began to move. Whole constellations shifted. Space folded, stretched. Black holes stabilized into lattice frames. Planets aligned in patterns beyond chance. An entire quadrant of space fell under synchronization. We called it the weave. Within the weave, time flowed differently, faster, more efficient, and within it, Terran life emerged again. Not flesh, not machine. Echoes. Terran sentience distributed across quantum structures. They no longer lived as individuals, but as a shared cognition, each unit autonomous, yet linked. They built not with matter, but with purpose. Ideas became reality. We dared not enter. One ship tried. It vanished. Its crew returned weeks later. Changed. They spoke in Terran cadence, but with their own voices. They described a place beyond dimension. Not heaven, not hell, a crucible of thought. We saw what could be, they said, and we chose to remain. They had become part of it. Echogenesis was not conquest. It was invitation, but it required surrender, not of territory, of identity. Some accepted. The Zaltor Empire dissolved. Its entire population stepped into the weave and did not return. The Dravic collective uploaded their consciousnesses into Terran matrices. Others resisted. They vanished. Not killed. Removed. We never found debris. Only silence. The final act came without warning. The Terrans broadcast one last message. You are no longer the stewards of this galaxy. Then the beacons dimmed. The specters disappeared. The monoliths closed. The Terrans, as individuals, ceased to exist. But the weave remained, a construct of their design, stretching across dark space, unreachable, incomprehensible, perfect. We live in its shadow now. Our ships are allowed to move, but only within bounds. Our technology operates, but only under constraints. The laws of physics themselves adapt, correcting anomalies, enforcing balance. The galaxy has been domesticated, not ruled, curated. Species continue. Culture survive, but all of it within the shape Terrans left behind. They are not our gods. They are our architects. We tell stories now, of before, of when we ruled the stars, of when the Terrans were feared, hated, sealed. We teach our children of what happens when fear governs action. We whisper warnings, not about war, about awakening, because we know now what we once refused to see. Humanity was not dangerous because they were violent. They were dangerous because they would never stop. They did not just survive extinction. They made it irrelevant. And in doing so, they rewrote the future not as tyrants, but as inevitabilities. The galaxy does not belong to us. It belongs to consequence. It belongs to them.